Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another session of 28 Days of Technology Careers. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about business analysis and business operations. So thank you so much for joining us today, Shaa, and as well as Donnell.
All right. So I'm going to kick off by introducing myself. As you can read, I'm Shaa. I work as a digital business analyst in sort of a startup in London here. So I work for a company which calls themselves InsurTech, which is a cross between insurance company who have their own technology team and stuff like that. So it's more like an insurance company in the fintech field. So I've been a business analyst for like 7-8 years now. So I started off my career working for Tata Consultancy Services, worked for British Airways. Then I worked for a fintech in the UK, specializing in cards and payments and fraud, anti-fraud software and stuff like that. Now I work as a digital business analyst for an insurtech, I said. So in this webinar, I thought I will take you through some of the concepts of business analysis and also include some experiences, some stories that I have from my career. I tend to tell a lot of stories, so you have to bear with me on that. So like the slide says, so business analysis, I believe it's sort of a valuable part of any project. However, these days, it's sort of when someone looks for a business analyst in their company or someone applies for a business analyst role, it's usually people assume and sort of map it to someone who writes requirements, who writes down what the system should contain. According to me, a business analyst is more than that. So moving on to the slide, I'm just going to take you through a broad category of business analyst and take you from that. So what are we going to see in today's agenda today? So like I said, there are different flavors of a BA role. I'm going to take you through that. And there are different elements of business analysis, different stages, if you will, and a few business analysis techniques. I'm sure you would have heard about lots of them. I'm just going to give you a few examples, not all of them, and sort of touch upon stuff I have used more frequently than the others, and how some modeling languages have been more useful to me. So it's more like my personal encounter with these techniques. So the next aspect is I'm going to just take you through what's the difference between an Agile and a Waterfall BA. This is one topic. I don't like the way it's dealt with currently. I'll come to that when I come to those slides. And the next one is the skills required for a business analyst. I think it's very important. So when you look at a business analyst, people, like I said, people tend to think about someone who writes requirements. There's more to it, and there are more skills that are required for a BA. So anyone can be a business analyst. Any skill, any soft skill that you've learned is transferable, I believe. So this is an insight into what a BA is likely to have. The last part of the agenda is to take you through a few tools that are typically used by a business analyst. Moving on. There are 3 flavors to a BA role, I believe. The first one, so if you look at any project or any program, any big change a business or a company or a small team, if you will, wants to implement, there are 3 levels to it, I believe. So for instance, you're working with, I'm going to give you a lot of insurance examples, sorry, because I work for an insurtech now. I hope you're okay with it. So for instance, someone is, say you have bought a new car and you want to insure it. So, but you don't want to talk to an insurance agent. You don't want to fill up the old school papers. So you want to do everything online. So you are looking for a company who does that. So a traditional insurer, have all these 30 or 50 years, they've all worked with analog forms. They filled a lot of forms. They asked for form 32B and whatnot for you to fill up and send them requests. So when you want to move everything online, you need to move the processes, and you need to move the whole strategy of the business online. So I believe a business analyst acting at that level will look at the strategic direction of the business. So for instance, if I am, say, ABC insurer, I don't have an online presence now, but I want to move into online. So as a business analyst, at the strategic level, the business analyst will look at the different areas or different touch points of the customer, and how am I going to digitize the whole thing? Am I going to digitize the whole buying policy part? Am I going to digitize the claims part, or am I going to digitize even more? Or do I have a marketing element here? Am I going to reach out to the customers different social media channels? So the study of this strategic direction of the business is also business analysis. So that it's at the strategic level, where the BA identifies what the overall objective is and sort of tries to align the different processes or different departments or different segments in the business to that strategy. So the next part is at the tactical level, where so you've decided, okay, I don't want to digitize my claims process. I just want to digitize the journey where the customer buys a policy with me. So you look at the end-to-end process where the customer tries to buy a policy. So you look at your analog process to see what are the different things that you want from the customer, and you look at what you have got, your platform, or what you've got third-party platforms say that you want to use to sort of start selling your policies. So you look at these processes, you look at the strategy, you sort of do a gap analysis to see, okay, I am here, I have these resources with me, I want to get to an end goal, which is selling policies online. So what is the missing part? So identification of that and identifying the process changes and changes related to people at that tactical level is also business analysis. The last part is what people usually think is business analysis, which is actually defining the solution. Okay, I know what third-party vendor or something I'm going to use to start selling my policies online. So I am a service provider I am a insurance company who wants to reach out to customers through social media. I want to actively bid with the affiliate marketing people to sort of get good exposure. So I need to define the solution, where am I going to embed this sort of tracking, what sort of interaction will the customer have, what sort of online form they need to fill, what sort of measures do I have in place for the system to automatically generate policies for the customer. So defining how the system or the process should work at this level is also business analysis, which is at an operational level. I'm just going to move on if there aren't any questions at this stage. So what are the different elements of a BA role? So if you divide when people talk about business analysis, they usually refer to, at least in the UK, a company is trying to build a new system, and a BA comes in and works with the business and the technology team to help them build that system. However, a business analyst can also work with the process team. For instance, again, sorry, insurance example. So you have a claims team who work on the incoming claim request from a customer for, say, a motor insurance. So you can, a business analyst can work with the claims operational team to identify improvements in their process, identify areas they would like to automate, identify checkpoints in their process. For instance, only a team leader can pay out insurance claim amount greater than say $1,000 or $500 or something. So putting in checkpoints, identifying areas of automation, making process improvement is also business analyst work, not only system modeling. So if you think of if you say elements of a BA role, you can divide them into these 5 areas, which is initially you need to understand what is the project or the change that you want to implement, what is the scope of it. And you need to understand, when I say workshop facilitation, I mean you get together with the stakeholders or the sponsors or people who are in charge to understand what exactly they want to do. And then you have requirement analysis and prioritization, which is, okay, this is the objective. I've got these sort of requirements from the stakeholders on what they want the solution to look like. Now I need to understand what part of this solution that they want to have is important, what part of the solution can be achieved by a system change, what part of the solution can be achieved by the process change. So you need to split it, tear it open, and sort of analyze the requirements granularly. Then once you have that, you sort of design the system or model the requirements. This could be so diagrammatically representing what you want to see in the solution or what you want to change in a process. And the last one is detailing the requirements, like specifying in terms of, so if you're in the waterfall world, it could be your requirement document, or if you're in the agile world, it could be your user stories. I'll come to that when we get to that slide. So moving on, so I have sort of, so each of these stages have some, there are millions of business analysis techniques that you can apply to any of these stages. I'm just going to touch upon certain tools or certain languages or modeling tools that I have usually used at each of these stages. So like I said, the first one is requirement gathering, then you have requirement analysis, then you have system or process design, and then specification. So under these I have mentioned a few topics there. I will probably not go through all of that, but just touch upon some examples that I've used sort of in real life. The first one is requirement gathering. So I have here, I want to talk about some workshop, mind maps, and whiteboarding is just, I think you know what that is. So moving on, so workshop. So I'm just going to give you an example of, of how I screwed up a sort of a workshop that I was supposed to handle in my first business analyst role, and what all I learned from it. It's a very bad example to give, but I think when you make mistake, you tend to learn a lot from it. So then I will relate the learnings to this slide. All right. So when I worked for British Airways as a business analyst in one of their largest transformation projects. So I was sort of a junior business analyst where I had a counterpart from a sort of a senior person who was supposed to run a workshop that day, so that we could talk to the people from the different airports to understand how they use the lost baggage system, which is in the airports. So you tend to lose your baggage. How is it recorded into the system? So when you find one, how do you update it or search for it and stuff like that? So we had people from different airports there. Different airports in the UK, there are quite a few. So it was difficult to sort of get time in their diaries and bring them all into one workshop. We kept postponing it for a very long time, and finally we got this one golden day when they were all available. Unfortunately, the person who was supposed to lead it, the senior business analyst, he was off sick, and I bravely, as usual, said, hey, I will do it, and went into the meeting. It was a 2-day workshop. I went in, and it was quite a bad workshop for me, because when I started, we started discussing about what they want to see in the solution, where people started discussing amongst them, and we couldn't reach any conclusion. And when someone started a topic of discussion which was sort of sensitive to the other team, there was a lot of arguments about it. So the end of the first day workshop, we had not decided anything. Nothing went according to plan. So I was really terrified. So I went to another colleague of mine he sort of had like 45 years experience. And I sort of went to him and like, oh, please save me. And he gave me certain tips, which I recollect until today. I sort of use it in my day-to-day life, which is, so he asked me, first thing he told was, always don't ask them what they want to see in the system. Don't let your audience solutionize for you. Always ask them what the problems they have, rather than ask them what they want to see in the solution, how the solution has to work. So first key point, don't ask your audience to solutionize. The next one was, he asked me to have a lot of parking lot. I'll come to that. Well, once we had started certain discussion, we hit a lot of dead ends, and we sort of kept going on and on in a loop about who, say, should a team leader have access to certain part of a system, and we couldn't come to an agreement. That sort of stalled the whole meeting. So these are the two tips he gave me. So till date, I sort of recollect that whenever I go to a workshop, I sort of stick to these. So some points on how to run a successful workshop from my experience. So before the workshop, you need to do a lot of homework, I would say. So understand who your stakeholders are. So what sort of level of expertise they have. So you can have a lot of mix of stakeholders. Some might have good technical expertise. Some might be just users of the system with zero technical knowledge. You need to gauge that and understand what sort of stakeholders you're going to deal with. There should be a lot of planning. You should have an agenda. Always stick to it. Always have a plan B. If an important or key person doesn't turn up, how do I sort of improvise the agenda on the go? And always, so before beginning any workshop, before planning for any workshop, always have what you want to achieve out of the workshop in your mind. So like I said, begin with the end in your mind. So what am I trying to achieve? Do I need to get all the sort of requirements out of the users today? Or should I just want to understand the high level idea of what my stakeholders can give me today? So you sort of have to have an end goal that you want to achieve out of the workshop, and always plan an agenda beforehand, and make sure you time your workshop well. The other point in my little story that I mentioned, the other point that didn't work in my favor was the workshop began just before lunch. So when we started the workshop and people were like, so when are we going to have lunch? Are you going to provide us lunch? And a lot of question around lunch rather than the actual workshop itself. So timing really matters. So on the workshop day, what do we do? First, you start with making your stakeholders feel at ease, so that's otherwise they're not going to give you what you want to get from them, the requirements or the objective or their pain points. So make sure you make them feel at home. Always set the scene. Tell them, okay, today we are going to discuss the lost baggage system. We are going to discuss the different access right or different the different users who will be using the system or stuff like that. Use visual aids instead of, like I'm doing now, instead of lecturing about what you actually want to do. Use a lot of visual aids, diagrams, use the whiteboard, use a lot of sticky notes or whatever they're called, so that you help them visualize what you make them see what you have in your mind rather than lecturing them about it. I think they're very useful. I can't go to a workshop without a whiteboard and a pen and a lot of sticky notes. So use a parking lot. So when you discuss different topics in your agenda, if you're not able to come to a conclusion, park it for then, maybe come back to it later or in another workshop. So if you sort of try to hit a stalling point about an agenda item, just leave it there, because you have a lot of people in the room. Their time is precious. Your time is precious. You don't want to waste time on anything that might not lead to an answer then. And use complementary BA techniques. By that I mean, so someone gives you a vague requirement. Say someone tells you, I want the screen of the lost baggage system to be blue color or red color or whatever. So in order to gauge the importance of that requirement, you need to ask them questions. I usually do the five why technique, where I keep asking them, why do you want to do it? I'm sure you're aware of the 5 whys technique. Or you ask them reasons behind their requirement, or ask them to draw up, use the whiteboard themselves. So these are the complementary BA technique I mentioned. So after the workshop, what do you do? So now you plan for your workshop, you had an agenda. When you started the workshop, you set the scene, you got all you wanted or most of it from your stakeholders. So what do you need to do? Document them, communicate. I mean, let your stakeholders know, hey, hello, thank you for your time. This is what we achieved. These are the action points. And can you please validate it? It's not going to hurt, so that all of you are on the same page. And do follow up, because sometimes you have people coming for your meeting. Even though they are prepared, they might change their mind later on. So they sit in this workshop, they give you some requirements, they go back, think about it, they might have some change of opinion. So do follow up and validate what you've written up, and don't forget to say thank you, because you might have to go to those people again. Sorry. So the next point I had in that requirement gathering was mind maps. So this is, you might not have seen this in usual business analysis techniques. I was new to this until I did my master's like 4 years ago. As a traditional BA, I had never used anything like a mind map, but I find after I've been introduced to it, I sort of use it every day. I think it's very useful visual tool that'll help you sort of link together different requirements to visually imagine how this whole process will work. And it makes documentation really easy, because otherwise you have to have, like, if you're writing up a document, you have to have structured bullet points and different headings, sub paragraphs and stuff like that. This visual representation is more appealing, I would say. So what's a mind map? So if you see the example on the screen, so it talks about someone placing an order online. So order has different aspects to it as linked in those mind maps. Say a customer can place an order can have different statuses. And so as a user, you can sort of log in, and I have a chat. Sorry, I need to open that. Sorry. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, my bad. I have to comment on that image.
I sort of have OCD, I think. So if something pops up, I need to open that. Anyway, ignore me. So there are different parts to an order, like I said. So it can have a status, it can have a payment related to the order, it can have, so an order itself can have several items, the price and everything, and also a history related to the order. So if you think of a mind map to be a tree and different branches, so order has different branches, like I mentioned. So let's take the branch which talks about the order item on your right. So order has an order item which has an amount, price, and some sort of discount, if at all. And this order item is linked to a product. So a product will have other stuff related to it, which will be description, price, stock, and stuff like that. So when someone gives you a requirement around, say, they want to see, so you want to buy a chair online, and you want a system to sort of help you sell chairs and enable people to buy them. So you will have different aspect to the website, which will be so that'll be at the website in the middle, where you let your user to log in, where you have your seller to log in to display their stuff, where you will have a link to a payment gateway or an ability to take payment, and we will also have other linkages where you will be able to see the details of this chair or whatever you want to buy. So this is a very useful way of sort of quickly pinning down what you hear from the user rather than writing notes, I would say. it has been really useful for me because I've worked in this really weird project in my master's degree where I had to sort of come up with techniques for automating certain part of paper publication or something like that. So it was very complex requirement according to me then, and there were different stakeholders who were working with me. There were other students. I was a BA, so I could understand it, but the other students were like, they were fresh out of undergrads, or there were people who had no idea of because it was a management degree, they had no idea of technical aspects of it. Mind map sort of was useful to all of us. So if you're technically aware, you can understand it. If you're not technically aware, you can still understand it. So these are very useful. So like it is said there, so it helps you visualize. You can link very disparate object information into one screen, and it also, so when you look at it, so you can identify, so if you are the person who is giving the requirements, if you see order can be linked to different things, you can find other linkages that are possible that you would like to see in the system, because you are visually exposed to these mind maps. So moving on, so the next part, I think I've taken a lot of time, but oh, it's already half an hour. Okay, just quickly moving on. The next one is requirement analysis. So now that you have gathered your requirements, you have had your workshop, you had this mind map and all that represented nicely. So you need to sort of analyze the requirement on a high level. So what I usually do it, once I come out of the workshop, I try to draw up a high level context diagram, I would say, which is nothing too technical, just to, so you have a bunch of systems or processes or departments you've spoken to. So this context diagram is like a high level bird's eye view of high level summary of what you have sort of gathered from all your stakeholders. So it just displays the different systems involved, how they are linked, what are the basic elements that the different users want to see. For instance here, so this is an online community, say a blog or something, which can be monetized by advertisers, which can be used by community users to, consume information. So what you have the different blocks, which are the different sort of users who are there. The arrows are the different the abilities that the user needs to have or need to be able to perform on the system. For instance, you have a blog, and okay, so there's someone has a blog and they want to monetize it by having pockets of ad banners that advertisers can use, and you have people, curators of the blog, who will help the advertisers lodge those banners in there. So you have community of users who sort of consume this information. So what do you need to have? So advertisers will have ad slots, they need to make payment to use that. Staff writers should be able to put in content, and they need to be paid accordingly. And you have different accountants to look at sort of reporting what sort of ad are we playing, are we getting enough monetization out of the blog. And you have the community users who register, log in, and consume the content. So these are the different aspects that will be represented in a context diagram. So you have had your workshop, you understood the high level requirements. Now you have a context diagram to have an overview of what you need to do. So this is just a summary of what context diagram helps you. It is for everyone. So a wider audience, your business analyst, your data analyst, your developer, your marketing team, your CEO can also understand it. It relates to the different systems in the environment, and it gives you a high level idea of how the functionality will work. So now you know a bunch of requirements, so sort of you might have to prioritize them. So this is as important, especially when you have time, when you have fixed the deadline for the project and you're happy with to move the scope around. For instance, in Agile, the DSDM, where you have your resources and time fixed for a project, and you would like to play around with the scope to have sort of a MVP product release, which will be the most viable product that will go out to the user or your business user or your end customer. So that's when this prioritization becomes really important. So I've just talked about Moscow technique here, which is So you can look at the different functionalities or requirements you need to develop and categorize them into different priorities according to must have, should have, could have, and would have. So like it says, must haves are something that definitely needs to be in the solution. For instance, again, an insurance example, you want to sell a policy online. The different functionalities could be, must have could be, you should be able to take payment. You must be able to take payment. You must be able to take information from the user. You must be able to send out an email to the user with their policy document. Should haves could be, you can if you look at the payment aspects, you can either take the payment in monthly recurring payments, or you can have payments which can be taken once annually. So a must requirement could be take payment once annually. A should have requirement could be, it's a good ability to have, where you let the users to choose between a monthly payment or an annual payment, but your system will still work without the requirement. So that could be a should have. A could have is something that is desirable. So someone logs into your system, looks at a quote, but does not buy a policy with you. So you can sort of send them a quote chase or chase or email saying, hey, you looked at that price, why don't you buy a policy with us, or something like that. These are sort of nice to have. Your system will still work without these, but so those fall into the could have category. Would have or something, if you put it in a better way, we would not develop for this release something like, so you want to be able to do for the future rather than now. So if you look at the bunch of requirements, the usual thumb rule, if you're aware of the 80-20, this is a slight modification of that, where you have 60-20-20, which is most of the must-haves, most of the requirements will be a must-have, which is 60%, should-haves will be 20, and the could-haves will be the other 20. So I just try to combine some mind mapping and the must-have briefing here, where if you look at it, so at the center you have mass scope prioritization. Must have the essential features, their minimum requirements. If you don't have, the system will fail. Should haves are important but not vital. The solution will live without it and might not be very efficient without it. So could haves are nice to have, which have less impact. Would haves are maybe included in the future. So sort of try to combine the Mosquet techniques with the mind maps to give a pictorial representation. Quickly moving on. So I'm just going to skim through the rest part because I've taken so much time already, because I talk a lot and tell a lot of stories. So the other part is so now you have the requirements, you've prioritized them. You also need to group them into different categories, which is functional and non-functional. For instance, functional requirements are, for instance, you use your card to make a payment through a website. The ability to take a payment on a website is a functional requirement. So when you take a payment, you get a response message from the payment gateway in few seconds. If it takes like 3 minutes, you'll be like, oh, who wants to use this website? So that timing requirement, that quality requirement, that is a non-functional one, which is not specified, sort of which is sort of implicitly required to be achieved. So these are non-functional requirements which concern the security or the quantitative or qualitative metrics that deal with the functionality that is required to be developed. It could be some infrastructure aspect. The system should not be down for more than 5 seconds or something like that. So moving on. So now we spoke about requirement gathering, requirement analysis. Now we're going to look at some modeling tools that will help you visually represent some of the requirements that you've discussed. So I've mentioned, I'm going to just skim through UML, which is Unified Modeling Language, and also the customer journey mapping, which is more close to the digital way of doing things these days. So UML diagrams are nothing too complicated. Like we all talk in English, we all know what a particular word means, how the grammar should work. So UML is another language which is for the diagrams, so that everyone understands when something is drawn up, what it means, how is its link. When one business analyst draws it up, the other one can understand, the project manager can understand, any sort of stakeholders can understand. It's more like a standardized technique. nothing major. So there are a bunch of diagrams under unified modeling languages, which have their own purposes. Some of them are static diagrams, which are sorry, does not show any sort of interaction, that they are more static. Some are dynamic diagrams, which shows the flow of process, the flow of information, or flow of messages. So these are the few diagrams that I sort of tend to use more commonly, which is one important one is a use case diagram, which sees the whole process change or the system development from the user point of view, how the user interacts with the system, what sort of interaction, do they click a button, do they open a email, or do they receive the email, how do they respond to it. That sort of a dynamic interaction between the user and the system is the use case diagram. Usually in a use case diagram, the system is represented as a black box. You don't see how the different components of the system works. All you see is the user interacting with the system. Class diagrams are static diagrams where you see the different components, the different data models that represent the system. For instance, policy management systems will have data relating to a person, the insured object, and the policy, and how you're going to renew it, what sort of data fields that a policy have, what sort of data fields that a person details have, and how these are linked. The next one is a sequence diagram, is again a dynamic diagram. It shows how different components or different parts of the system talk to each other at different intervals, what sort of messages are passed, what triggers what sort of interaction. When someone buys a policy and completes the purchase, that triggers an email to be sent to them with the policy document, something like that. Component diagrams are similar to class diagrams. They're static, but however, it shows the different components that are within each system and how they interact. Moving on, so customer journey mapping is an important hot topic, I would say, if you are in the digital world. So it talks about how how a customer interacts with your system, what sort of feelings they have, what sort of thoughts or experience they have while using your system or a service or a product, how you sort of can improve the touch points that are there, and how you can bring about a positive outcome by addressing those touch points. An example here, I'm not sure if you can see this, okay. This is an example where someone wants to say, I use this example often, someone wants to say learn pole dancing. So if you can see, the topmost row is their feelings. So they are like, wow, in the first one is like, wow, I want to learn pole dancing, and they're thinking, where will I be able to get more where will I be able to do that? So they sort of, how do they do it? They learn from someone about it, or they sort of see a picture or a video about it, or it's through social media channels they learn about it. That's how the touch points. So once they know it, they try to Google about it. Now they're more focused, anxious, and excited to sort of learn more about it. So they Google, they read blogs and their websites. And once they have information, they sort of try and book the class. So they found the class and where they want to learn pole dancing. So they're more anxious. They sort of book the class and ask some questions about what they need to wear, and when will the class be, and how long it will take, and stuff like that. So this is more like you look at the people feeling and sort of try to address it, try to improve it, and try to bring a sale to your product or service in here. So the last part of the requirement specification is how you specify in terms of document, which are in the waterfall world, you have a hierarchy of documents starting from a business requirement, moving on to functional, and moving on to the system level. And on the agile world, you have your user stories. For instance, you want to buy a chair, say, so you write up the requirement, something like, as a user, I want to buy a chair so that I can sit on it and get some work done. This is a very crude example. So you need to, every user story will also have set of acceptance criteria linked to it. So in your behavioral development, you sort of have behaviors attached to your user stories, or you can also have business rules attached to your user story. If you have any questions, you can email me and can get back to you on that, all right? So what's the difference between an Agile and a Waterfall BA? Waterfall BA is more like the requirement analysis and the other part are done well upfront. You have all the requirements and the change to it is quite rigid. BA role is upfront, and at the end, when you have your user acceptance testing, in the middle, you sort of are supportive where you get back to the technical team with if they have any question. In Agile world, it's more iterative. You sit with the team throughout the project. It's more continuous where you churn out requirement in chunks. So the key skills required for your BA, like I said, you don't have to learn all of this. You can learn all these techniques, any methods you use on your job, but all key skills you need are the ones listed here. Active listening and understanding, good communication. You need to be able to document well. You have some sort of negotiation skill to get your way or get someone to agree on what they want, and some sort of situational leadership where you take ownership of the situation and get it done. So, well, that's about it. There are a few tools used by BAs like Jira, Visio, Trello, and whatnot. That's it.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and you are very passionate about this topic, obviously. So if anyone out there wants to follow up with you with any additional questions, do you have a social media channel that people can contact you with?
Yes, please. You can contact me via LinkedIn or via my email, which on the first slide, it has my email ID. So if you can email me, I can definitely get back to you. Sorry, I overran. I keep doing this. I kind of, but
next time we'll give you an hour. No worries.
Sorry about that.
Thank you so much, Shaa.